course, of course. So, to go back to the energy equation, for our car to run optimally, there are 4 important players. You've got to have the right fuel in the tank, and that's all about diet and gut function. You then have to have the mitochondrial engine. And for the engine of your car to run, guess what? You've got to have the right fuel in the tank. And it's also got to have, there are some essential nutrients that allow that engine to run well, and it has to be free from toxic stress. But then you need the thyroid accelerator pedal and the adrenal gearbox. So, I could be driving a Formula One car with, perfect fuel and a perfect engine. But if the thyroid accelerator pedal is set at 5 miles an hour, I'm going to creep along at 5 miles an hour. If you're Lewis Hamilton, you would not be very chuffed by that. So we then have the thyroid accelerator pedal and the adrenal gearbox. And I have to say, those 2 conditions are incredibly badly treated by Western conventional medicine. Not my words, but the words of consultant endocrinologist Kenneth Blanchard, who wrote a book about this, and he only dared write the book once he was retired because he knew the opprobrium that he would receive from his fellow endocrinologists, saying that thyroid conditions are amongst the worst treated conditions in Western medicine. And you will not get the right answers from your GP or from your endocrinologist. Why? Because they only look at the blood tests. And if you only diagnose hypothyroidism through looking at the blood tests, you will miss many, many diagnoses, and you will relegate people to a life of misery because their thyroid gland is only working at 5 miles an hour. And going slow is not fun. Spending energy is fun. Earning energy is jolly hard work. So we then have to sort the thyroid out. And then we need to look at the adrenal glands. And I actually often do these 2 things in parallel because yes, you want the accelerator pedal to go faster, but then you've got to move up a gear in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And adrenal fatigue, again, is common. Again, the endocrinologists don't diagnose it. Yes, they will recognize complete adrenal failure, and that's called Addison's disease, but it's rare. And that means you have no gearbox at all. But they don't recognize when people don't have an overdrive, they don't have a 4th gear, they don't have a 3rd gear, they don't have a 2nd gear. That just gets dismissed as airy-fairy stuff. But there's no question it exists. Why? And do we have a good scientific basis for this? Yes, of course we do. And this dates back from the 1940s and the 1950s. Wonderful work by Hans Selye, who wrote a book called The Stress of Life, that describes how important that the adrenal glands are in this process. So those are the 4 big players that have to balance up. And then on top of that, we have servicing, healing and repair. Now, my ancient truck, yeah, it's an ancient truck, but, once every 6 months, down to the local garage, changes the oil and sorts the spark plugs out, whatever, and it goes better. But our bodies need servicing every single day, and they need sleep. And it's during sleep that we heal and repair. And again, I could spend a whole podcast just talking about another of my favorite subjects, which is sleep. And all the things that I've talked about will impact on sleep. If you are not eating keto diet, if you're running your body on sugars and carbohydrates, your blood sugars will be up and down and up and down, and so will your adrenaline levels be up and down and up and down. If you spike adrenaline at night, then that will wake you up. It will disrupt your sleep majorly. So just getting into ketosis hugely improves the quality of sleep. Again, we talked about gut function. We talked about the inflamed gut. And if you've got an inflamed gut, you've got an inflamed brain. And guess what? The inflamed brain doesn't sleep either. So that's all central to that. And again, you need energy for sleep. We've all seen the overtired child that can't sleep because he's too tired to sleep. It's the same with us. So you don't go to bed when you're fatally exhausted. Be disciplined about sleep. In fact, I ask my patients to be as disciplined about their sleep as they are with their diet. You need the hours of sleep. And guess what happens in the winter? We hibernate. And you need more sleep in the winter and less sleep in the summer. We have to respect that, the seasons. We don't just do our standard. I always go to bed at 10 and I wake up at 6. It's just not like that. Sometimes in the winter I might go off to sleep at 8:30, and in the summer with the light evenings it might be more like 10:30. So our sleep changes with the seasons. And again, that reflects how light actually controls the sleep we get. And again, it makes perfect evolutionary sense. In the summer, we need to be busy out there, hunting, storing food, growing things, getting the garden ready, spending lots of energy. And in the winter, we need to be in hibernation. When it's dark and cold out there, you can't hunt safely. You can't farm safely. You have to be tucked up in your cave, with your tribe, keeping warm, minimizing energy expenditure. And that's what we do during sleep. The body temperature slows. We curl up in our hibernating caves. We keep warm and we minimize energy expenditure. So being disciplined about sleep is important. And to say that is controlled by light. Now, if I can give you 2 minutes on that circadian rhythm, which is so important. Yeah, light, and I'm very lucky. I work in my conservatory, so I have lovely full spectrum light falling on me all the time, and that's what primitive man did too. You're working in a cave. That's not good, Alex. You should be.
I should turn my screen around. I've got windows just here.
Well, the more light we can get in the day, the better.
Right.
And that switches off melatonin production. Now, melatonin is the sleep hormone. It's produced by the pineal gland. As that full spectrum light disappears or goes down, we start to produce melatonin. And that's what initiates sleep. Now, it doesn't make you feel dozy, but it's a hormone. Without melatonin, you cannot sleep. That kicks the pituitary gland into action. And the pituitary gland then secretes thyroid stimulating hormone. And the level of TSH comes up, and that spikes about midnight. The thyroid stimulating hormone then kicks the thyroid gland into life, and that starts to produce thyroxine or T4, and that spikes at about 4 o'clock in the morning. T4 is relatively inactive. It gets converted into the active T3, and that spikes at about 5 o'clock in the morning. T3 then gets secreted, trots around the body, and kicks the adrenal glands into life. And the adrenal glands get kicked into life about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And that spike of cortisol and adrenal hormones is what actually wakes us up. So we have this very marked circadian rhythm of hormones, which is determined by light. Listen to that. Don't try and fight it. And if you get tired and sleepy, then yes, you must go to bed and you must sleep and rest. And that's going to be longer in the winter than the summer. Another clue that energy equation is failing, i.e. energy expenditure is getting close to the energy bucket, is people have to sleep on at the weekends. They accrue a sleep debt in the week because they're working hard, getting up early, keeping things going, with carbohydrates mainly, and then they crash out at the weekends. They don't wake until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. Another very important symptom that you've got that energy equation wrong, and your ship, as I call it, is heading to the wrong.
So are we saying then that sort of the paleo keto diet can be very helpful also from just an adrenal thyroid perspective as well then?
Absolutely. It's one of those wonderful, as I call it, multitasking tools. I mean, as doctors, we are trained one symptom, one drug, and off you go. And it's just not like that. It's far more complicated, and of course, much more interesting as a result. And one of the things I'm trying to do is accrue wonderful multitasking tools that do so much. I mean, my most recent book is Ecological Medicine, which is the whole picture. And the multitasking tools which I choose in there are to take us to good health are tools that are available to us all, that are free from side effects, that can only do good, that are cheap, and that do so many jobs. So the paleo ketogenic diet is vital for energy delivery mechanisms. It's vital for normal rude gut health. It's vital for good quality sleep, and so on and so forth, and much other too. It reduces our toxic load because we're no longer fermenting. It reduces the work that the liver has to do because the liver no longer has to deal with all that toxic stress. And that is the first tool that we should be using. And my view is it's non-negotiable. And these days, I'm old and I'm tough and I'm irritable and I just say to my patients, you just got to do it. Don't come back to me, saying I've taken all these supplements, I've done this, but I haven't done the diet. You're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. Getting well is like building a house, and the foundation stones of that house are the paleo ketogenic diet. And if you don't do that diet, then everything else is a waste of time. Just a little example of that. If you are eating sugars and carbohydrates, with age, you will have a fermenting gut. It's absolutely inevitable that it will be fermenting. Now, what's fermenting there? Well, it's fermenting by fungi, yeast, and it's fermenting by bacteria. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, mitochondria, which are the engines of the car, they are bacteria, or rather they were bacteria. And what that means is what mitochondria love, supplements like CoQ10, acetyl L-carnitine, magnesium, D-ribose, and so on, bacteria love too. So if you start taking nutritional supplements for your mitochondria, then all you're doing is feeding those microbes in the upper fermenting gut. You're giving them survival value. You're malabsorbing them. Now, of course, you get a little bit on board, but it's just a waste of money. It's just you're wasting those precious resources feeding bacteria that shouldn't be there. So you've got to go PK. Then you can absorb the supplements that you need. And then you can correct your mitochondrial engine. And then you can tweak the thyroid and the adrenal glands using glandulars or whatever to find control, to control those mitochondria. Because the actions of thyroid hormones and adrenal hormones are on mitochondria. That's how they work. That's how they make your engine go faster. In fact, one of the fascinating things about thyroid hormones is they work in two ways. Yes, they make your mitochondrial engine go faster, but they also increase the size of the engine. So instead of going around in a De Chevaux at 5 miles an hour, you're going around in a Rolls Royce at 50 miles an hour. And guess what I want to be around? I want to ride a Rolls Royce at 50 miles an hour. So, the thyroid hormones are doubly important for that reason.
And I think I'm right in saying that's sort of a bi-directional relationship, is it? So mitochondrial health also influences thyroid health.
Well, you can't make thyroid hormones without energy.
Right.
You can't make adrenal hormones without energy. The heart can't beat without energy. So yes, of course, I know I presented this in a very simplistic way, but
helpful.
All these things are interconnected. I mean, for example, another major hole in our energy bucket, which might be chronic infection or allergy or inflammation, thyroid and adrenal glands have profound effects on inflammation. There's an intimate relationship between the two. So I'm separating all these things for logical thought, but of course in actual reality, in actual practice, they're indivisibly intertwined, and mitochondria have a direct effect on inflammation, for example.
Okay.
But the underlying principles of all this stuff is I'm trying to reduce the biochemical and the immunological friction in the system. So the trouble with drugs is they work by blocking, beta blockers, anti-cholesterols, proton pump inhibitors, they all work by blocking biochemistry in the system. The non-steroidal anti-inflammatories work by blocking inflammatory processes in the system. But that's not good because all that increases friction. Whereas with supplements, nutritional supplements like vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, oils, CoQ10, they work by reducing the biochemical friction. So normal enzyme processes in the body flow more easily. Everything happens more readily. Why do we like cycling on a tarmac road? Because there's no friction there. Do I like cycling across a ploughed field? No, there's a lot of friction there. It's damned hard work. It's the same in the body. So all these things we are doing are reducing the friction. And what's so fascinating about that is things that you wouldn't expect suddenly resolve. They get better because suddenly we have the energy and the raw materials and the systems to deal with that something, whatever it may be. So people might come to me with great shopping lists of symptoms. And I say, well, I'm not sure if this causes that or this causes that. But by putting these interventions in place, you clear those muddy clinical waters. Suddenly, cause and effect becomes much more obvious. And, again, people, they don't come to me, 5 minutes after their first symptoms, so we can really nail what it was that caused it. They come having had 20 or 30 years of symptoms. And that's a real muddy mess there because on this drug and that drug, and this operation and that intervention, and that muddies things even more because all those things increase the friction in the system. So the earlier you can get somebody in treatment, the better. And as I say, if you can make the whole thing less cloudy, you can clear those clinical waters, it so becomes much more easier to diagnose what's going on. And with every patient, I'm quite sure you're the same, Alex, always go back to the beginning. When was the last time you were fit and well and healthy and nothing the matter? And then what happened? Was it somebody put in a dental brace? Did you have a vaccination? Was it an acute viral infection? Was it some traumatic event? Because that gives such important clues about what's going on.
Perfect. Excellent. Dr. Myhill, I'm mindful of time, and that might be a nice way to conclude. But just to make sure, is there anything that you haven't mentioned that you really just want to mention or reiterate?
Crumbs. I could talk to you for another half hour if I said that, because I've missed a lot. But what has people, obviously I've written books which are helpful, but what I have started doing is online workshops that anybody can join. If you go to my shop, you can join a workshop. There's a maximum of 20 people, and you buy a ticket for that if you like, and I talk all day about this stuff. So I start at 9:30 and I finish at 4 o'clock with a break for lunch, and the whole thing is recorded, and people can ask me any questions at any point. And what is lovely is that often the groups that come remain together as a group, so they can help each other and interact and exchange ideas, and we can interpret tests, and I can point people in the right direction. And people do love that. And the reason I now feel empowered to be able to work like that is because the basic workup is exactly the same. The foundation stones for every building is the same. The engine for every car is the same. The underlying biochemistry is identical, and the approach is now standard. And therefore, I don't have to treat people on a 1-to-1 basis. I can treat them on a 20-to-1 basis and be just as effective. So if people want more of me, then that's another way they can get at me. And then if I can't do micromanage everyone, that's when therapists like you are so helpful. And that's why I have a website called Natural Health Worldwide, where anybody can access any therapist, and any therapist can access me in order to spread the word.
Perfect. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Myhill. I think we're going to have to go and hit play and listen back to this. There's a lot in there.
Very good, Alex. You've been a great host. You're asking all the right questions.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. I'll drop you an email, Dr. Myhill, when this is out, just so if you want to share it with your community, you can. But thank you for sparing the time, and hopefully we'll connect again soon.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.